Hello everyone, we continue our Azure Data Factory tutorial here. In this part, I show you how you can parameterize your pipeline, how you can call another pipeline from a pipeline, also show you how to use different activities like Foreach, If Condition, Set Variable, and Web. And also we generate a JSON file as the output of our data pipeline. Alrighty, let's get started. Like previous episodes, we've got a requirement here. We discuss this requirement and then we implement that and we try to cover the head titles that I spoke about them earlier. We want to extract the data stored in all tables in Azure SQL Server database and move them to a storage account with CSV format. One CSV file is created per table with the table name. And if a new table is added, data pipeline should cover that automatically. Basically what we want to do here in our Azure SQL Server database, we've got multiple tables, might be T1, T2, T3, for example. And we want our pipeline to move the data that we've got for each table to a individual CSV file in the blob storage. So for example, in this case, I should create T1, T2, and T3 as a CSV file, and it should move all table rows and records inside that CSV file. This is what we want to implement here. From technical perspective, I've broken down this solution into two different pipelines. The first pipeline get a list of tables from our SQL Server database, and after that, it invokes the second pipeline, and it passes the table list as a parameter to the second pipeline. In the second pipeline, which is obviously accepting that parameter, for each table in the list, we copy data from the table in SQL Server to a CSV file. This is the high-level architecture that we want to implement for this solution. First of all, let's have a look at our Azure SQL database. So I have two different tables here at the moment in the tables list, dbo.students and dbo.watermark. And in the students table, I've got 4 rows. And in the watermark table, I have 1 row. So this is our setup in our SQL database. In the storage account, I use the same storage account that I created in previous episodes. If we go to the containers, I have my target container. It's an empty container at the moment. We use this one for creating the CSV files here. I start with creating the first pipeline. We need a data set for reading the list of tables. So I create the data set as a first step. Go to ADF, and in the dataset section, you can see the list of datasets that you create here. I create in 3 dots, new dataset, and we choose Azure SQL. Click continue. Give the dataset a name. And for the link service, I use the previously created link service. We just created that link service earlier in the previous episodes. And just choose a table name here. It doesn't matter. We want to use a query and click on OK. You can click test connection to make sure that it's working fine. Connection successful. Okay, we're done with this bit. Then next step is creating our first pipeline. So I click the 3 dot and new pipeline. From right pane, give it a name. And from general, we grab a lookup activity. Give it a name. Go to settings. Select the dataset that we created earlier. Untick the first row only. We want to have all the result. Click on query, click on edit. This is the query that will extract the list of tables for us. So let me just quickly run that query in query editor here and show you what is the output. So it makes more sense. So as you can see, the output is table schema and table name for all tables that we currently have in the database. And what it does, it's reading the data from a system table called uh, tables, and its schema is information underscore schema. So this is a internal SQL Server sys table. We have two conditions for that. We say that we want to have base table only, and the schema that we are after is DBO schema. So this is helping you to just get the list of tables that you've created, not all others bunch of different tables that we don't need them here. So if you look at here, if I run the query without the where clause, you get a system table in your result as well that we don't need that. Okay, go back to ADF Studio and click on OK. You can preview data here as well. Yep, we are getting the expected result. We can just validate our pipeline so far. It works fine. And we can publish it just in case we don't lose our changes. So click on Publish All and publish. Publishing completed. So in pipeline one, we did the first step. Now we need to just trigger the second pipeline. But the second pipeline hasn't been created yet. So we need to just create the second pipeline first and then come back here and continue. But before doing that, I'm just going to run the pipeline one and make sure that the first step that we created is working as expected. So I click on debug. It's in progress. And now it's completed. If we check the output result here, we see that the output results generated properly. And this is a JSON value that we need to pass it to our second pipeline as a parameter. So if you are familiar with JSON structure, thumbs up. But if you don't know about it, I just quickly give you a little bit of context about that shortly, and then we continue. JSON format or JavaScript object notation format is a simple format for transferring data. So it's very easy. So if you have an array or a collection of elements, you put that inside a bracket. So for arrays, you need bracket. And then inside the bracket, which is your arrays elements, for each element, you need curly brace. And inside that, you put your object properties. So for each property, you need to have property name, that colon, and then property value. Okay, we create our second pipeline. So click on three dots, new pipeline. I name it iterate and copy SQL tables. And from here, we need to create our parameter for this pipeline. So I click on new and I name it table list. Its type is an array, and we don't want to have a default value for that. So this is how we create a parameter for the pipeline. So when we want to run this pipeline, it accepts this parameter as an input value. In second pipeline, the first step is done. It's accepting the parameter. And the second step is creating a for each loop for looping through the list of tables in that parameter. From iteration and conditionals, just grab a for each here. I name it iterate SQL tables, and we go to settings. In settings, we need to tell ADF that this for each needs items for looping through that items. So I just click here and click on add dynamic content. As you can see, we've got different tabs here. In parameters tab, we've got our created parameter, which is table list. So if I choose that, uh, it gets added to the expression text box. I click on OK, and we are done with this part. It means that the table list is passed to the for each loop, and for each loop is run for each item in this list. Next step is going to activities. We need to tell the for each loop that what activities we want to run for each iteration. So if you click on this pencil icon, you can add your activities inside the for each loop. We want to copy data from SQL, so obviously we need a copy data activity. I name it copy SQL table data. Then we go to source, click on new to create a new dataset. So as you can see, you can create dataset from here, or you can just create it from this dataset section. Search for Azure SQL and select that, continue. Call it SQL tables dataset, and from link service, I use the previously created link service, and we click on OK. We choose query, we click on edit. We write this query, say select star, which is for selecting everything from a table from, and then for the table name, we need the schema and we need the table name. So it's like dbo.students. Item here means each item from the items that you've passed to the for each loop. And we say that for each item, we want to have table schema and then dot, and then we want to have table name. This is what it does. So we are reading the content of each table basically using this query. So click on OK. Go to sync. We create a new data set for this one. So it's going to be Azure Blob Storage and delimited text. I name it CSV tables dataset and choose Azure Blob Storage Link Service that we created in previous episodes. Go to Browse, choose my target container. Okay. And then click on Advanced, open this dataset. So it gets saved and it opens up the dataset in a new tab for us. So we can do more settings here if it's required. We need a parameter here for this dataset, which is the table name. When we want to create the CSV file, we need to create that with the name of the table that we have in the SQL Server. So we go to the parameter, we click on new, we give it a name, table name. Its type is a string, and just in case if the parameter is not passed properly, we give it a default value. I put unknown here, so we know that something's wrong with our parameters. Now we go back to connection again, and here for file name, click on add dynamic content, and we can choose that created parameter, which is table name here. So we add it here, but we need to just change it a little bit. So I go to functions. You can see a list of functions that you can use here in the expression. So I need a string function for concatenating this table name with .csv. So I just create it like this, and then we click OK. So it adds a .csv extension to our table name for the CSV file name. Okay, we go back to our pipeline, and as you can see, the CSV table, the dataset that we created, populated here. So we need to pass the table name to this uh, dataset as a parameter. Again, I click on here and click on Add Dynamic Content. I use iterate SQL table current item. So it adds this for us. And then we say dot table underscore name. And I think we had it all in uppercase. So I just fix it like this. Table name, and we click on OK. Validate our work. Everything is good. I'm going to publish all. Click on publish. We got published. So we're sure that we are not going to lose anything. So now I can go back to the first pipeline and just invoke this pipeline. So for that, we need to drag and drop execute pipeline activity from general section. So I grab it here. I name it trigger copy data pipeline. We go to settings. This is the second pipeline that we are after, iterate and copy SQL tables. And just untick this wait on completion. And in its table list as a parameter, click here, add dynamic content, and say activity, and give the lookup activity name here. And then in its output, we've got the value that we want to pass it to our second pipeline as a parameter. I click on OK here, and then if you just connect this together, the error will be disappeared. If I go back here, you see that there is no red border on this field anymore. Validate our work again, and we just publish. Done. Now I run it in debug mode, so I click on debug. And wait for that to be completed. Lookup table list done. Now it's going to the next activity, which is trigger copy data pipeline. And that was successful. Okay, let's go to the storage account to see if those CSV files being created. Refresh here in the container list. Okay, looks like no file is being created, so it must be an error in the ADF side. So go back to our pipeline. So we need to go to monitor and go to the pipeline runs, and in debug section, here you go. You see that the second pipeline's failed. So I click on that, and we check the error message to see what's wrong. So the expression item dot table name cannot be evaluated. The parameter name that we are passing to the data set is not working. Okay, so we've got a typo in table name, so we need to go back and fix it. Okay, we go to author, and in the second pipeline, if I click on this copy activity, in copy data, in our sync, so we've got a typo here. Fix it, click on OK. Just validate that just in case and publish our changes again. Now I can run the pipeline for the second time. So I go back to our first pipeline and click on debug again. So it was successful. Just in case, we go to monitor and double check that everything's gone through successfully. So this time it succeeded. Go to our storage account and refresh. And here you go. Our CSV file's been created. So if I click on a student, you should see the 4 rows that we've got in the student table. And if I go to the watermark, I should be able to see the record that we saw earlier in the SQL Server. Excellent. I delete this file so we can run our pipeline again. So click on delete. Go back to ADF Studio and we go to out there and our first pipeline. So I want to do a tweak here, and at the same time, I want to show you how we can use the if condition as well. So one thing that might be worth checking is when we are getting the list of table in this lookup activity, if the list is empty or there is no table in our database, we shouldn't call our second pipeline. So we just need to terminate the pipeline here. If we want to just achieve this, we can use a if condition. So if we go to iteration and conditional section, we can just drag and drop a if condition. So I change this orchestration that we have currently here. So click on that and press delete and connect it to this if condition this time. Just move them around a bit. So in if condition, we basically have a name for that. So I name it if any table. And if you go to the activities, you need to put an expression here. So this is the expression that gets evaluated. And based on the result of that expression, if it's true, the true activities are run. If it is false, the false activities is run. So our expression here would be, if we go to our dynamic content, click on that. So it gives us the row count for the lookup activity output. And we want to just make sure that if it's greater than 0, we just call that second pipeline. So we need to go to the functions as well, and we come to logical functions and click on greater. We say if activity output count greater than 0. So this is our expression. Click on OK. So I just right click on the execute pipeline and cut it from here. Then I go to true section, click on edit, and right click here and paste it here. So this way, if we go back to our previous step, uh, when the lookup activity is run after that, based on the output row count. If it is greater than 0, then the second pipeline is called. Otherwise, nothing's happened. So I'm going to just validate our work and publish it. And now I run it again to make sure that we haven't broken anything. So click on debug. It completed successfully and it's been added here and it's as a part of our pipeline. So if we go to our monitor and refresh the data here, you see that in the iterate and copy SQL pipeline, we also have a parameter column. And if you click on that, you can check the value of the parameter here. So this helps you if you want to just debug the value that you are passing through the pipelines. So if I just click on maximize, we have a better view and we can see its value. Let's go to the storage account and check if CSV file is created here. Yep, we've got them here and it's working fine. Excellent. We managed to meet this requirement. I slightly changed the requirement, as you can see on the screen. I want to just change the CSV format in the output to JSON format. This way, I show you how to generate JSON output for your data pipeline. Also, I can show you a few more activities and their usage in ADF. Let's have a look. I just go to ADF Studio and go to the pipeline section and open up the second pipeline that we created, iterate and copy SQL tables. Select for each activity and go to activities and click on pencil button to edit this activity. So for generating the JSON output, I want to use different kind of orchestration here. So I delete this copy data from Foreach and I replace it with other activities for generating our JSON output. To delete that, just click on that, select it, and then press delete. Then as a first step, I need a lookup activity. So I go to general and drag and drop a lookup activity here. Call it lookup SQL table rows. Go to setting. For source data set, we use SQL tables dataset. Untick the first row only as we need all the rows here. Choose query and we go to add to edit, sorry. And we use the same query that we used earlier for selecting all rows from the table that we have passed to the for each. Click on OK. We've got it here. Validate our work. All good. The next step is using set variable activity. So the output of the lookup activity is a list of rows for a table. So I want to just uh, change the type of this output to a string. Then in the next step, we'll store it into a JSON file. So variable is a temporary container, basically, that you can put your content inside it. And if you want to change it to different type, or if you want to just manipulate data inside it, you can do that stuff using set variable. So I give it a name, call it JSON variable. And then I go to settings, click on new, give your variable a name. This is the variable name, and you specify the type of it, which is a string. Confirm that. And for its value, we go to add dynamic content, and we use this expression. So what it does basically, it's converting the output of lookup activity into a string format. So the string function is converting that to a string. So click on OK. And we need to connect this lookup activity to set variable. Now that error has gone away. Validate our work. All good. So far, we just fetch the records for a table from SQL Server, and then we convert it to a string output. Now, next step, we just store that variable value into a JSON file. So for that purpose, we need a web activity. So web activity is an activity for doing different web actions. So if you want to call a REST API, you can use this activity. Uh, we are using the same kind of method for creating a blob inside the storage account, because a storage account has a RESTful API which is exposed for creating blob or doing blob operation inside the storage account. We use this method to create our blob there. So first of all, I give this a name, call it create JSON blob. We go to settings. For the URL, we need to follow this convention. So we put our storage account name and then .blob.core.windows.net. Then we need to put our container name and then our blob name that we want to create, and then dot, and finally the blob file extension. Uh, in our case, this is our storage account name. This is our container name, my target. And because we want to have the blob name dynamically based on the table name, so we just use concat function, and then we just concat the table name with .json. So this is what we use in the URL section. So I just copy this and put it here. The method, we need to use put method, and in the body, just click and add dynamic content. Body is basically the content that we want to write inside that blob. So it's the content of the variable that we created in the previous step. So we need to go to the variable section, and we've got it here. So you just click on that and click on OK. Obviously, we need to just connect this together. And I come back to that again. For authentication, we use system assigned manage identity. So I quickly explain what that means to you. Then we come back here and continue with the rest of the steps. If you want to access securely to an Azure AD protected service like storage account, Key Vault, or SQL database, one method which is a best practice is using manage identity. This way, you don't need to manage credentials like password, client secrets, or certificates, or things like that. So in our case, we've got our Azure Data Factory, and we want to just access a storage account securely. So the way that manage identity handles this is uh, we can assign a unique identity to our ADF, and that unique identity is called manage identity. We have two types of manage identity. One is system assigned, another one is user assigned. So the system assigned one is basically assigned by system automatically when you create the Azure Data Factory, and it's normally the name of the data factory that you are creating. So in our case, because our ADF name is OSA builder -ADF demo, so the system assigned identity for that is this name, but you can create a user assigned identity as well. If I want to simplify explanation. It's like a username that is assigned to your Azure resource, and anytime that that resource wants to access any other resource in Azure, it uses that username for authentication purposes. So we go back to ADF. I'll show you that system assigned identity, and then we need to grant access to that identity to have access to the Azure storage account, so we can use it inside the ADF to create blob inside the storage account. If you go to ADF and go to settings section and then manage identities, you see that there is two tabs there, system assigned and user assigned. In system assigned, if you set the status to on, which is its default, it creates a manage identity for your ADF, and you can check what kind of permission or role assignments have been done for this manage identity so far. So if I click on Azure role assignment, you see that at the moment there is no role assignment for ADF. So if I go back to the previous screen, if I go to user assigned, you can just create a user assigned one as well. So it's creating a service principal manually and just use it as an identity here. To assign proper access to the storage account, we need to go to the storage account and give access to this ADF manage identity. So in our storage account, I go to access control, click add role assignment, search for blob contributor role. It's a storage blob data contributor. This is the role that we need. Click on next. In next screen, use manage identity and then click on select members. Select your subscription, and then from manage identity, you see that you've got a bunch of different resources that have manage identity. So we want to use the data factory. So it says that data factory's got one resource at the moment. So I choose that one, and then we just click on that and then click on select. Then we go to review and assign and click review assign. It's done successfully. Now we can go back to our ADF and continue with our work. Okay, as we spoke earlier, we choose system assign manage identity here. For resource, we want to access a storage account, so we need to put this URL here, storage.azure.com, and it tells ADF and the authentication system that we want to access a storage account. We need to add two headers here based on the API documentation. The first one is the version of API that we want to use here on the Azure storage account side, this key and this value. Another one is the type of blob that we are creating here. So we need to put this key with the value of blob in the header as well. Validate our work. All good. I'm going to just run this pipeline to see what is this result. But before that, I'm going to show you something in the ADF. So if I go back to our ADF workspace and in manage identity, if I click on Azure role assignments now, we should see the role assignments that we did earlier. So as you can see, it tells you that this manage identity has storage blob data contributor access to this storage account. Okay, we go back to our storage account and to our container to see if there is anything there. It's empty. Okay, I go back to our ADF Studio to run our pipeline. So first I publish our changes. It's done. So if you want to run this pipeline, so if you remember, this pipeline was called by our first pipeline. So I need to run the first one. Get table list and trigger copy data. So just trigger now and click on OK. So we can go to monitor and check the status of the run there. So it's in progress. Refresh the screen. And it seems that the first pipelines succeeded. The second one's still running. Succeeded. So if we go to our storage account and refresh, as you can see, our blob name hasn't worked. So we need to go back to the pipeline uh, and go to create JSON blob activity in the URL one. So I think we missed a curly brace here. So just the curly brace before and after the concat function here. Click on OK, publish, done. Now we can run it again. So I go back to the first pipeline again and trigger now. Click on OK. We go back to monitor to check its progress. It succeeded. Go back to our storage account. And here you go. JSON file is created. So quickly check its value. I just quickly take it to the Notepad++ and format the output so you can see that better. Make sure that it's worked fine. Go to plugin, JSON viewer, and format JSON. There you go. So as you can see, we've got an array, and then we've got 4 rows, and the data for this table is moved properly here. We can have a look at the other JSON file that we've got for the watermark table as well. Quickly and edit. So as you can see, it was only 1 row and it's moved across properly. Alrighty, we implemented this requirement successfully as well. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe and like. I'll see you soon with more interesting content. Bye.